Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life-transforming while delivering a message of hope. All right, welcome to this week's podcast. The topic we're going to attempt to tackle and talk about is going to be, in a relationship, does love have to be mutual? And that would include any type of relationship. I know a lot of times we tend to think of marriage first if you're married, but it actually goes with any type of relationship. So does love need to be required on both sides in order for it to be impactful, or is it necessary, or is it supposed to be mutual?
Well, I would say, Tony, that, and Ida, that I would hope that it would be mutual, but do I believe it's mutual all the time? No. And the reason I say that, I've worked with a lot of families where the parent disappears and leaves the child, and the child is left hungering or with this hunger to be in a relationship with their parent. So when I see the child, I see that the child has this loving, this aching love for the parent that's absent. And when you talk to the parent, it's almost like it was a responsibility. Like, well, yeah, I'm there. I'm going to show up.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to show up. However, you don't see that love. So I guess my question to you is, what is love?
Yeah.
How do you define love?
Yeah, I would probably say it's putting yourself aside for the betterment of somebody else. And many times it's going to include sacrifice. It's going to include time, sometimes money, or all the above. But I think in a perfect world, it should be mutual, but in the world we live in, it's not always mutual. Sometimes I feel like, sometimes there's seasons, where, like just the example you brought up, like even me growing up without a father, I didn't have that love for that season. But then later on, when I did meet him and God restored that relationship, then we were able to exchange love. But there was a season where it wasn't there, or sometimes like in our marriage, there might be times where I feel like I'm kind of putting in a little more effort than my wife. And then I know that the opposite's true as well, where I could see she's probably putting more effort than I am. But I think in our relationship, it's almost like a teeter-totter sometimes. I don't know if it's always 110% on both sides at the same time. That would be ideal, but that's just my thinking, initially.
I think like the average person would consider love to be more of a feeling and not so much you show me you love me.
That's good.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially in marriages. If you get married and you're basing your relationship on, I don't feel that you love me. And I feel it's not so much a feeling. And I've caught myself many times falling into that, where I feel like it's a feeling, I don't feel loved. I don't feel like, you're showing me you love me or anything like that. It's feelings, but I think more it should be something that you act upon, you show, you do. And I think it's okay to have, the feelings are normal.
Right.
They're natural, but I think that more than anything, it's what you do in a relationship to show that person that you love them.
I think like how you mentioned about the feeling part of it, I think that's important, because I think you're right. A lot of people, that's what they would put in a nutshell. If I feel it, then it's active. It's working in this relationship. But if I don't feel it, it's not there. But I think we have to understand that love isn't a feeling, because I know, just from experience, sometimes you could do the right things and pursue love, and the feelings will come. Sometimes they don't happen initially, but as you're doing the things that you need to do to love someone, the feelings will follow. But sometimes people don't want to put in the work in order to achieve or to arrive at the feeling stage.
Right. So it's basically that person's idea of love.
There you go.
So with the scenario that I used, that parent, even though I didn't believe it, I didn't see it or didn't think of it, he's loving his child the only way he knows how to love the child. But is that fair?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's fair. But like one of the things that I did that I had to kind of understand with my own mom is I remember her, it was a rough relationship, there was many good times, a lot of bad times, but in general, it was pretty rough when I was a kid. But as I got older and I saw and heard what type of life she lived and how she was treated by her dad, I actually felt more compelled to give her grace and mercy because I see what she was given. So
Right.
in my eyes, I saw maybe she didn't have a whole lot to work with. So whatever she did do, in my eyes, it could look like, oh, she only loves me 25%. But in her eyes, she was doing 80, 90%.
Yeah.
And here I am throwing a stone at her saying, oh, you weren't this, you weren't that, when she could possibly be saying, son, I'm trying to do everything I can with what I have. Look at these broken pieces I'm trying to offer you.
Oh, yeah.
And you're slapping them out of my face. Sometimes we do that to people. And I think part of love is giving grace, which is, you're giving them something they don't deserve. And mercy, you're not giving them something that they should get.
Right.
But I think those are components of love that would change the whole relationship if we are willing to put ourselves in the other person's shoes before throwing that stone at them.
Yeah, that's so true. So then in saying that, Tony, and Ida, do you believe that love has to be mutual in a relationship?
I think I'm at where you're at because
And I'm putting you guys in the spot because I'm about to bring up something. Yeah.
Go for it.
I say
Ding, ding.
I agree with what you said earlier that I would like it to be mutual, but I
Right.
know that we talked about it earlier where there's marriages that one doesn't love the other,
Right, and they stay together for-
arranged
yeah.
marriages, let's say. But then we think about the arranged marriages in God's word, and I thought about Isaac when Abraham sent a servant to go look for his wife, right? And here's Rebecca coming back on a camel, right, with the servant, but she sees Isaac afar off and she gets off her camel and Isaac sees her, runs to her, takes her straight into his tent.
Yeah.
And knows her, but he loves her.
From the moment he saw her.
He fell in love with her, and I believe it became mutual.
Love at that point.
So for me, it's like it can happen.
It can happen,
God,
yeah.
if you allow God to let it happen, and I think it's also through allowing us, especially as believers, allowing God's agape love, because sometimes we might find it hard to love somebody that's unlovable.
Yeah.
But through Christ, through his love that's unconditional and supernatural, we're able to love the unlovable.
That's so good.
So in a nutshell, would you say that it has to be mutual?
I'd say yes. In the end, it should be mutual.
Yeah.
Mutual. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be where you're in a relationship and one loves the other one doesn't love that person.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. I mean, in the end, it should be a mutual thing because I don't believe that it can work and be built upon a solid rock if
One person's always loving.
right.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be mutual in a marriage, but I think that's a requirement to be married, that there should
Yeah.
be a level of love always.
Unless it's arranged.
Yeah. But even there, it maybe goes back to something I said earlier, that by doing the right things and knowing that your parents chose the best of the best to bring to you and to present you that spouse, that I think that as you're doing the right things and that the love can come,
Right.
But I think I was thinking about it right now when you both were talking, and the marriage is the only one that I think that it's a requirement because of the covenant that's made.
Right.
Because even with your kids, you can love them, but sometimes you're in the season where they don't love you. Yeah, in a perfect world, again, it should be mutual, but I don't know if that's always the case.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think in a marriage, because it's a covenant where it's not a contract where, hey, I do this, you do that, because that's what a contract is. A covenant is saying, I'm actually going to love you until I can't breathe no more.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There is no way out. I'm not looking at a plan B. I'm not looking at another option. I'm not
Right.
trying to get out the back door. But when a marriage has that attitude and that mindset, I think that the love will be mutual. And like I said, it can teeter-totter where, maybe it's 80% one, 100% the other. But in a nutshell, there's mutual love there,
There's
period.
mutual love, yeah. And for all the men listening out there, I hope you heard that. You love them until the very end, until his last breath.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
What would you guys say though, if you guys take the love out of it? What if they respected the person, said they treated them like a good person, just like almost like friends in a marriage, would you guys say that would work? Or do you think it's still, at the end of the day, love is what keeps you guys going? Like, can you guys be roommates, and live a happy life?
Well, I think
Well,
to go.
actually, are you saying married or not married?
I'm married.
Okay.
Yeah. I think specifically because, like how you said, love, I think marriage is the main one that requires that. What if you respect the person and you like best friends basically,
Sure,
but
sure.
maybe you don't love them?
No,
that
I
make
think
sense?
I think that's a form of
love,
love.
yeah.
I think that's a form of love, because I think that if you're with somebody, okay, in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or even you have roommates and you're really close to your roommates, right? And I think that just by your actions, what you show them, just everything about how you treat them, how you respect them, because I think in general, love is the center of every relationship. We're to love one another,
Yeah.
unconditionally, no matter what, right? And I just find it hard to say, oh, I like that person. I like you. I like that person, right? But and I get it if you don't know them or you don't have a relationship with them, whether it be a friend or a wife or husband. But if you think about once you know them and you start building that relationship, it's like with my friends, I love my friends. I have a relationship that was built upon years
Right.
knowing them, and I love them, right? And so when we get together, we reflect that to one another, right? By the way we talk to each other, the things we share, it's love.
Right.
Love is the center of that relationship. So I think that it's hard to not really.
Well, actually,
connect that.
Mary started off with the question, or one of the questions is, what is love? I think breaking down a little bit more of like kind of what I said earlier is kind of like what the world would say about, laying down your life for somebody else and just giving of yourself. But in the Bible, it talks 3 main loves that I recall. And the first one is agape. That's where it's unconditional love. Okay. Then there's eros. That's like the sexual type of love. The third one is philo. Philo is the friendship love. So you could have the friendship love, like or Ida was saying, my wife. You could have philo love in like a friendship, but agape's unconditional. So I think that there could be a couple that's committed, that are best friends, that love wanting to spend time with each other more than everybody else, wants to talk to them and have conversations and go places and travel, do all this stuff. And maybe because they choose not to use the word love, they're still walking it out.
They're still walking it out.
So I think
good.
that's a way of looking at it as well, that there could be love there, but sometimes people hesitate on using the word love, but they know how to walk it out. They know how to give of themselves, but they're just maybe gun shy to use that word.
Yeah. And if I had to answer your question, Gio, this is what I would say. So, I've worked with a lot of families, but not just that. I've lived it out myself. So I don't believe that a married couple can live happily within a home. And this is what I mean by that, happy within a home, not loving each other. Tolerating each other is one thing. Doing it for the sake of finances, for the sake of the children and whatnot is one thing. But when you say we can coexist together but not love each other, will bring a lot of issues, a lot of chaos, not just to those 2 people, but anybody else around them. Because there's something so special about a marriage. If I love him so much, I'm tolerating him and we're living in the same home. However, so-and-so just spoke to me, so I'm just going to go outside and talk on my phone to this person. There's going to be issues within the relationship when we're talking about a marriage. If you want to take off and go to the movies and you don't invite her, obviously you don't love each other, you say, but you're coexisting together. So there's still some type of loyalty to that other individual because you're married to them. So that's where the issues arise when one person wants to do something and the other person doesn't agree with it. So can you live in the same household when you're married and say we don't love each other? I think it's going to be very difficult, and you would just bring so much hate and resentment to yourself and that other individual. That's just my opinion. I have an elderly couple that I went to their home, and he has his bedroom in one side of the house and she has her bedroom on the other side of the house. And when you walk in there, you feel the hate. I don't know if you guys know what it feels like to walk into a place where it's cold and they have this beautiful home and everything, but you feel the hate. And I remember talking to the woman and I said, what happened? Why is he over there and you're over here? And she said, something that happened a long time ago. But because of the finances and the children, we decided to live together. But I can't stand him. And I thought, this is horrible. Like, you would choose just for money to live in the same household with the person you completely resent. And in a way, I believe that they do it just to get to that person. I'm going to make him pay for what or make her pay for what she did to me. So I would, any couple out there listening, get therapy, get help, learn to find that light again within each other so you can live together and be, this life is so short. You don't want to just be here and always all your life live it in hate. So if you are married, if you are in a relationship where you're married, either learn to get along, go to therapy, call us, we can help. You heard Tony's testimony a while ago, you're supposed to love to the end, because without love, there is no life. Like, if you know what I'm saying, as far as a marriage. So either figure it out or move apart so you can be happy, either together or apart.
Yeah.
So then I have a question then.
Yes.
And you pretty much answered it, but maybe we can go deeper in it.
We'll ask it again.
No, actually. So you're saying that if two people, let's say they're tolerating, they're having a marriage is just chaotic and things like that, and they fall out of love with each other. Do you believe that love can
reignite?
They can reignite. Uh-huh.
Yes, absolutely.
110%.
Yeah, when both parties are willing, because then you go back to one person loving and the other one just hanging on.
Okay, because I know there's a lot of couples out there that don't believe it's possible. If somebody is out there, a marriage that is basically going through it to where one maybe fell out of love with the other, or they both fell out of love with each other, is there hope?
Well, one thing that I would look at is that sometimes people, when they fall out of love, like you were saying about that couple, Mary, they'll fall out of love and then they turn around and don't want to end the commitment,
right?
Because they look around and all of a sudden they're going to see that they're labeled as a failure. They didn't make it.
Yeah.
Now the kids see, wow, that's what became of them, and they had this facade where everything looked so beautiful, amazing, the house, the cars, all that stuff. So now they get that stamp of failure because they didn't succeed in their marriage, and they don't want to face that. That's the only reason why they don't want to end it.
Right.
And I think that if two people choose, because if you think about it, why would you want to torment yourself
Exactly.
by living outside of love in a commitment that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with? It doesn't make sense.
It does not, no.
So why would you want to torment yourself? Am I saying, run to divorce? No, I never will say that at all. That's never the first solution. The first solution is, what could you do to make amends? If there's hurts and you can't talk about it amongst yourself as a husband and wife, then you need to get counsel. You need to seek a pastor, somebody who can help guide you through and help manage those conversations so that it doesn't end up worse. But I think if you're willing to put in the time, you can reignite that love. It's going to take time. You didn't get to that point of despair overnight. That was a sum total of choices that you made over certain years where you put other things ahead of your spouse, and now you have to face the consequences.
Right.
But now, what are you going to do? Are you willing to put in the time? Can you look at your husband or your wife and say, no, you're not worth the time to reinvest in, to try to get love back into our relationship? If you're willing to look at your spouse and say that, then maybe you need some outside help. But if you're willing to look at your spouse and say, you know what, you're worth it.
Yeah.
I remember why I married you.
Yeah.
I remember what attracted me to you. I remember the beautiful times we've had. And although things kind of went south, you know what? Let's make a choice.
Yeah.
Every day, let's chip away some part of this stony heart so that we can have a heart that actually loves each other again.
Right.
And if you put in the work, you can restore that relationship.
Exactly. And we're not just talking, well, for me, I'm not just talking saying, oh, look at this couple or whatever, because I've gone through it. My husband and I, we were at that place, like, we're just going to stay together for the sake of the kids. We've got to finish raising these kids, but that's no way to live. So we both decided to do the work, which was, okay, I dove into church and sought guidance from my pastors. And he went his own way to try to figure out what he needed. But we came together to this mutual agreement that, okay, we're going to get to learn each other again. We're going to know each other. We're going to learn what our differences are and what happened, and then forgive the past. But if we can't forgive the past, we're not going to move forward. So it was a lot of work there to be able to get to the point that we're at today. So it can happen. That's my point to all these couples out there. If they are listening, it can happen, but both of you have to be willing to do the work.
That's good.
Actually, I'm going to share this part because I feel like, and I agree with both need to be willing, but then I disagree. The part that I disagree is that I remember there was a season in our relationship that I fell out of love with him. And it wasn't until I broke my arm and I fully was dependent on him. And he surprised me because out of anybody and everybody in my home, he was the last person on earth I thought that would even care about me enough to even want to help me, because I felt like this person doesn't love me anymore. And so when I broke my arm and he started stepping up, and he just out of the blue, just really just started taking care of me, doing things that I was almost like, because I was really 100% dependent on him. And the way he was treating me and taking care of me was like, wow, this is the man that I've been longing for, you know?
Yeah.
And I started falling in love with him again. And God started just, and everything in the past left me. It's like, I loved this person. I wanted to be around him. I wanted to hang out with him, you know, everything. But I wasn't willing at the time. At the time, I was like, because there are a lot of marriages where it's almost like a blame game. No,
And
you
we
need
hold-
it first.
yeah,
You
we
need to
wanna
start
hold
it
on to the
first, you know,
past.
and,
Yeah.
or no, you need to. And I think Tony's actually taught me where he would always be like, and it was hard because we go back and forth, and then we wouldn't talk for days. And then I would always like, well, you know what? He needs to change. No, you need to change, you know, and one of us has to change.
Right.
Sometimes one of us has to get up
Yep.
and say, you know what, enough is enough,
Yeah.
and start changing. Sometimes it's hard, especially for a woman, for me personally, when I would fall in my ditches or my moments of like despair or just sadness, when I'd be really hurt because of what I was going through and experiencing, it was really difficult for me to get out of that pit because
Right.
I didn't have anybody that I could confide in or anybody that I could trust enough to share what I was going through in my marriage.
Right.
And with that, that's where I had to really just put my trust in God. And I'm trying to find the word.
So what part do you disagree? Because I don't quite get.
Well, no, I just say that not always is it mutual in the beginning.
So there might be
Sometimes it
seasons
takes
or
one
something.
person to make the first step
There you go.
for the other
Okay.
person to follow.
Okay, I get it.
So that's where I
Yeah.
wanted to go. I actually wanted to go like,
yeah.
does love have to be mutual in a relationship? So my answer is not necessarily, and maybe not always in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because if we think about it, and the people that we are today, God loved us even when we didn't know him.
Yeah.
And that's where it all started.
Exactly.
God chose us even when we couldn't look up to him. And if I have to talk about myself, I know that there was a time that I would say, God, who? Like I was completely like, don't you love God? I remember a young kid saying that, and I was like, no, I don't even know him. Like, why would I love him? But even in my pit, I know he loved me. I know now, looking back, I know that he never stopped loving me. And there's so many individuals that are so lost right now. And if you were to ask them, they would say, nobody loves me. But there is somebody who loves them.
Yeah.
And see, that's why I say love doesn't always have to be mutual, because look, he continues to love us. He'll pick us up even though, and if we could just get it and turn to him and not be looking for somebody else here on earth to fill that emptiness within us, we will know that we've always been loved. And then we could in turn give that love to somebody else. So that's why I say maybe love didn't have to be mutual in the beginning, because God didn't wait for us to love him first. He loved us even when we couldn't see him.
Right.
That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if we kind of get out of the mindset or the equation where people will turn around and say, hey, marriage is 50-50.
Right.
It's not 50-50. It's 100-100.
Yep.
And if you can see it that way, that could help change some things. Because if you think about it, if you've been, let's just say like me and my wife have been married 30 years. If you've been married a good chunk of years, just say 10, even 10, 15 years, do you really want to throw away those years that you gave the best years of your life to? and just to start all over, it doesn't make sense, because you there might be hurts, but you can't say that there wasn't good times at all. And one of the proof of that for me is pictures and videos.
Yeah.
If you have taken pictures, and because we're helping a family member go through a funeral, and we went to another one a couple weeks ago, and they had slideshows of a person's life, and different phases of the life, when they became a parent, when they were grandparents and stuff. But you can't turn around and easily say the whole thing was for nothing. Because if you go back and just look at pictures, those can stir up some memories of things that you've done as a couple, as a family, throughout your marriage, that, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. I forgot that trip. And we did this together. And it brings up so many different memories. And that's actually one thing that I thank God for, is that my mom, she was a photographer. So she has so many pictures. But that's one thing that helps me not always look at the bad times. Wow. Because the pictures that I see, there's some, but very few I remember are hurtful. Most pictures are smiles, and it was Christmas, it was a birthday, it was a trip that you went on. So sometimes you might even have to look at some of these pictures to remember and reminisce over some of the great times that you've had together.
It wasn't
to
all bad,
stir something up. And I think that that's something to keep in mind. And if you don't see each other as valuable, why don't you excavate? Because when something's excavated, you find treasure, you find jewels, you find gems. So like we said earlier, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to dig a little, you're willing to tear up some dirt and some rocks and dig in and go deeper, guess what you're going to find? We need to excavate our marriages in order for us to see the beauty that's there.
Yeah. That's so true.
Well, I don't know, Mary, have you seen Fireproof? Have you ever heard of that movie?
Oh, I don't know.
No? It's one of my favorites. It's low-key cheesy, but I really like it because the whole story is a married couple who don't really know God, and they come to a point where they're like, we just want a divorce. The wife is like, I don't want you. And the husband's like, what did I do? So it's this like blame game. And I love it because when they decide they're going to divorce, the husband goes to his dad, and the dad gives him a book called what is it called, Dad?
40 days.
Oh, yeah.
The Love Dare? The Love Dare?
Yeah.
Okay,
Love
yeah.
Dare.
So it's called The Love Dare, and he gives him this book, and he says, do this for 40 days for your wife, and if after the 40 days it doesn't work out, then do what you're going to do. So the husband does it like forcefully, like you could tell he's not genuine. He's like, he buys her flowers, but they're like the cheapest flowers. You could tell he didn't put his heart behind it.
Right.
But you notice he ends up coming to a place where he finds God. And then he starts to you see the progress where he starts to love his wife as God loves her. Like he sees her through a new lens. But it took him finding love to give the love. You know what I mean? And it just kind of makes me think of that because I don't believe it has to be mutual. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But I can see even like growing up with my parents and how one was working out, like trying to work out the marriage, the other one wasn't. But I can see that if you keep God as the center, or if you seek after God, you're always going to end up finding yourself back at the place of love.
Right.
Wow,
Because
that's
you can't encounter God's love and not give it out. Like it's just automatic, you know?
Right.
What would you guys say though, outside of like church, marriages in particular, if they're out of love and say they're, wanting to like throw in the towel, what are like some things they could do
tools.
practically that will ignite? Like you were saying, I think you've touched on a couple of them, but what are some practical things? I know the Love Dare, that's a really good thing to start, but outside of church, like what can someone do to like, hey, I don't want to give up. I want to reignite. There's still hope. What are some things they can do?
Get off of social media, first of all. I would say if you're really working to try to get your marriage to work or reignite that fire, get off of social media because it is too tempting. And I believe that what is out there right now is beyond what that I had ever expected. That's one thing. And the other thing, Gio, I would say work on you. Work on you, because if you don't know what love looks like or what it feels, then you can't give that. So if you can get to that place where I like the way this makes me feel, now you're going to want to make that other person feel that. And it's those little gestures that you don't actually have to think about. You just willingly do them. You don't have to work at, like buying flowers. That should be something that people just do just because, not because it's a special occasion, or call somebody up or send them a cute little text like, I really am thinking of you. I can't wait for whatever. Those are the little things that people should be doing without any effort. But it starts with you, and it has to be that person that's healed, because if you're not healed, you can only give what you have. And if you only have half a cup, you're only going to be able to give that. And sometimes we can't even give that because we're just holding on to it to sustain us. So it's healing yourself first to be able to give to others or do for others.
Yeah. There's another book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, I think it is. And I think that's another step after what Mary said, where you're seeking on, how can I give love in a way that they'll receive it instead of how I receive it? So I think that's another thing. But reading, I think, is one of the big keys. I think I mentioned this a while back, but I heard that Will Smith was struggling in his marriage a long time ago, and he went out and bought 50 books on marriage just to revive his marriage. And he went and read through them and worked towards that. So I think reading is a big deal. Whether if you're not going to church, you'll get some good tidbits there, and that can actually help catapult you to the place that you want to be. Or try to do things that couples do. Maybe go on a cruise, maybe do some of the things that you see other healthy couples do to emulate that, to where it starts happening in you as well. Because like I have my uncle and aunt, they're always dating. And they, like I said, they seem like they're still on their newlywed. I mean, their honeymoon, you know what I mean? But I think if you do the things, you take steps in the direction you want to go by looking at people who are ahead of you, that kind of helps pull you forward.
I would say communication. You work on the communication. I think that's 100% priority, is the communication. I think sitting down and finding the right moments, the right time to really even come forward with questions, asking, especially, with me, I think communication, you talking to me and you kind of like putting water on my fire. And because I think it's in a good way, because I think it's when you come together in communication, it's the language that you bring, don't cut the tone, the language, everything matters. The body language matters, how you look at each other, how you respond to each other. And I think that if you can talk, and the more you talk, and the more you're able, especially men, let your wives talk, even though sometimes we can, we have a million words to say, and sometimes we're going around that same mountain saying the same thing over and over and over again in different ways. But sit and listen. And that's one thing I have to say about you, my husband, is that he's an amazing listener. And I would just talk. And I just keep saying the same thing over and over again. But just sit there and listen until I'm done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Pull up a chair.
Listen until your wife's done talking. And then when she's done, wives, you let your husbands talk and let them reflect and let them tell you and tell each other what each other likes and what each other doesn't like, especially when it comes to intimacy. And then the more you talk and the more you really get to know each other through conversation and just being open and honest, and women, just get to the point.
Yeah.
Straight up.
In conversation.
Just straight up tell them how you feel. Don't beat around the bush, because I've learned, you know what, I'm just going to tell you how I feel at this moment, and that's that. Don't make him try to figure out what you're trying to tell them, because we do that a lot too, where we're trying to we play those mind games, and then the husband has no clue what you're talking about,
because we do not speak the same language.
Exactly. So just be straight about it. Yes. Tell them exactly word for word, as clear as day, what you want them to know. And
Dr. Miles Monroe has a good book on marriages, so highly recommend it.
No, I just say, because when you're saying like you don't get to, like, women don't get straight to the point. Someone said that men love puzzles and love figuring things out. That's why God gave them wives.
Good one.
That's funny.
I heard another one where this guy wrote a book. He wrote the book in 10 minutes. He threw it on the desk of the publisher and said, "Okay." And the title was "Everything I Know About Women." and he went to open it and it was blank pages.
Yep, kind of goes that way.
Yeah. But here's a little something to keep in mind, women. When
love it.
when a man comes out and you see he's actually vulnerable in his conversation and he's coming out of his cave.
Yeah, that's
Be
right.
careful not to say the things that make him run back in, because
Be
he might not
patient,
come back
yes.
out again. So just a little.
And actually, we're learning because we started learning, and we need to practice it more actually on communication. We haven't really done our homework,
Somebody.
but something that we were told to do is you have to practice communication. It's not something you're going to learn overnight.
There's a structure
Especially
that
if you've gone years and your communication you feel is not going anywhere. I think you have to just step back and honestly, there are counselors out there that can help you with communication.
Right.
There's communication classes you can take, but it's something that you have to relearn. If it's been going on for years and you feel your communication isn't going anywhere, you can relearn it. It just takes practice, and you
A
have to make
willingness to
time,
learn.
a willingness
There you
to
go.
learn and make time for it, and learn to talk to each other, because your language does have to change. 100%, your language has to change.
Yes, and for couples that are listening right now, the other point that I wanted to really hit on was do not compare yourself to other couples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we cannot, especially for those people. That's why I say get off of social
good.
media, because a lot of people tend to go to social media to see how somebody else is living their life. I've been guilty of it. Look how happy they look. They're going on another vacation. And in reality, you see them and they can't stand each other. So we do it all for the picture. A lot of people do it just for the posting. So do not compare yourself to other couples, because they have their own struggles and they've learned to live life the way they've learned to live life. And for you, it's like, this is what works for me. It may not work, because a lot of couples, like, they tend to talk to each other and have loud voices. That doesn't work for me. But when I see these couple, I'm like, how do they make it work? But because both of them are crazy. So it's like both of them like talking like that, but it works for them. And to me, it may not look like love, but that's not fair, because I don't live in their home and I don't have the routine that they have, and I don't have the life that they've built. So do not compare yourselves to anybody else, because nobody has it perfect, and we're all struggling just to make it. And we're all working at it to be better each day.
And I heard the other day too, they said that, I don't know if I shared this before, but it was just the other day I heard this. They said that marriage is psychological. One is psycho and one is logical. Don't try to determine who's who.
The women are the logical, I think. Right?
Yeah, and I know we ended up starting off talking about, is love need to be mutual in relationships, but I know we ended up talking more about marriages. I hope some of this has helped you.
No, I was just going to say, I think too, which I don't know if any of you guys said it yet, but don't stop dating. I mean, I'm single, right?
Yeah.
But I've
You're right.
watched enough relationships and I see enough relationships
Yeah.
to know don't stop.
And women, because I think we've been a little harder on men. And women, don't stop letting your man know that he's everything that you wanted.
Build him
and
up.
Continue to build him up. So in wrapping up today's conversation, I think we gave so much information to all the listeners out there, young and old, in every relationship, whether you're struggling to get along with your brother, whether you're struggling to get along at work, and especially in marriages. This is why we're here. And if you can't find a source out there, this is what the podcast is all about, is helping strengthening families. So we thank you for listening and can't wait to talk to you again.